Okay. How's it going? Sorry I'm a bit late. I'm later than I normally am. I'm always a bit late, but not usually 20 minutes. But we're getting things worked out here, figuring things out with this new schedule, and it's gonna it's gonna get smoother and smoother. So I wanted to talk today about science in general because uh, of a number of conversations that I had over the weekend and things that I had seen from just the truly cutting edge of the scientific world, I think, that is not yet regarded as the mainstream. And uh, I wanted to discuss what the future of science is and what direction it's heading, because it's about to have a fundamental shift, I think. And if it doesn't, then I mean, there's no way that it doesn't. There's just no way that it doesn't. It's just going to shift who is in charge, but it's not going to not shift. It has to shift because any other thing that happens is just impossible. It's like there's going to just be a group that breaks off from academia, which is already happening if academia doesn't come around quick. But I don't think that it will. And I think that that's probably because the incentive structures around academia are geared towards now making money off of student loans. So, student loans are given out to basically everyone now, and they probably should not be given out by the government at all. And it should probably be uh, that if you want to go to college, you have to pay for it yourself or you have to get a private loan, as college currently stands. Now, that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be loans for things like trade schools that are different. But if you're going to go and you're going to get some degree in some field that is a subjective field and not intrinsically useful, okay, like history or something like that, then there's no reason for the government to give you a loan. And I don't even think the government should give anybody loans. Actually, I think we should just get a UBI, and if you want to use it for a trade school, then you should be able to do that somehow. But our current universities have to fall. I was in this discussion over the weekend or last week, and it was with a small group of people um, on Clubhouse, and it was discussing institutions. And uh, Eric Weinstein was in this discussion, and probably like 10 other people that I'm not sure who they were, but some of them followed me, and I got a notification to join this discussion. And they were all discussing how do we save the institutions, and I don't think that we can. And Eric admitted too that he doesn't think that we can. But I mean, he seems more like committed to trying than I am. I have no desire to try to save the institutions at all. I think that they're just done. We have to build new ones. So I asked him, what do we need to do to give legitimacy to new institutions if we did create them? And I didn't really get like the most black and white answer, but I mean, I have my own ideas about this. But you need to create new institutions that have experimental success and engineering success. That's my thoughts on it. But uh, he had basically said we need to decouple research from teaching, which I agree with that completely too. Like we need to do that. I've been saying that for a while. I said we need to decouple um, education from research for like over 2 years probably. I've been saying that. I think it says it in the very first video on this channel of escaping our academic institutions. That video that I made, and this because what's happening is that the incentive structure surrounding getting everybody into college, giving everyone a student loan, has created literally like an incestuous relationship between the government and academia in a way that is probably unprecedented, and also um, definitely an unprecedented level of incompetence, because you can't prioritize competency when you are prioritizing, you know, uh, universality. So competency is intrinsically a restrictive, uh, you know, incentives. It requires restrictive incentives. Like it must be a restrictive environment. That's what I'm trying to say. It's a restrictive environment. But if it's prioritizing universality, it cannot be prioritizing competency. And I mean, we are seeing that. I have people in my life close to me that work for universities, multiple of them, and so I do know what's going on behind the scenes of these places, and it is so much worse than you can imagine. I mean, you look at, like, I don't know what a lot of conservative media outlets say is going on in these places. It's so much worse than that, which is insane, but it is actually worse than that. And there is no saving that. You have to let it go. One of the good things is that, with all these new requirements regarding the current world situation, it does seem like a lot less people are going to start going to the universities. They're going to start allowing a lot less people to go to the universities, especially people that have not been stuck, if you know what I mean. I'm not going to talk about it on live stream because they'll kick me off. But that's a good thing. Why would you send your kid to a place? Why would you be angry that they won't let your kid go somewhere to be educated? But if that education institution is actually fundamentally toxic, and it is toxic, it's beyond a waste of money. It destroys your mental faculties. It incentivizes hedonism. It leaves men and women especially scarred. And they don't even realize it. Because the things that happen there are just not meant to happen to people. I mean, you're not meant to go to a frat party and just, be prey, every other weekend. That's just not what's supposed to happen. And that is what happens to women. You might think that you're going there for the free drinks and stuff, but it's not worth poisoning yourself while you stand around and hopefully don't get too poisoned to become prey. It's just a toxic environment. It is a little bit mind-blowing, but what's happening is that we are having research groups that are forming, like the Resonance Science Foundation with Nassim Haramein, Quantum Gravity Research Foundation with Clea Irwin. I'm sure that certain billionaires have their own little groups studying all kinds of things. I'm not trying to even say any companies. I think that Garrett Lisi just founded a new research, institution, which is basically a really nice house of his, and or his houses. And that's how it starts. I mean, look, that's how Apple started. Apple started in a garage. Microsoft started in a garage. All these things start in garages. And so if it starts in, Garrett Lisi's house in Hawaii or his house in Aspen or something like that, that's probably the start of a new and highly relevant institution. And it's entirely decoupled from any kind of academic incentives, which is great. And so this is going to cause a totally new reset in science. Just like, people say, oh, it's the Great Reset. That in some ways that is good. In some ways that is bad. The fall of old institutions is good. The fall of the 9 to 5 work, schedule, that's some office corporate job, commuter job, that is good. If you use it properly, though. If you don't, it will be bad. Because complete decentralization is actually complete centralization. So as we decentralize, recognize that if you don't consciously go into that, realizing that you're, as we decentralize, you're also making it inescapable almost to leave, that system. As the system gets more mobile, it's harder to escape it. I burned my mouth on pizza, so if I sound a little weird, forgive me. But it's like a little painful to speak, but whatever, we'll press on. But it's important to just realize what's going on. So the next thing in science is we're about to have a radical repositioning of our perspective on everything that we know. And I'm going to show examples of this because there actually are some groups, even within academia, working on this paradigm shift, I guess you could say. And I am remarkably surprised at how much they're being allowed to get away with questioning. And I mean, I have my own theories as to why, but it doesn't matter why. It's a good thing that they're being allowed to question in these groups. There is a group called, we're going to look at them here. It's run by somebody named Sarah Walker. And Sarah Walker is a physicist. She's easily one of the best theoretical physicists I've ever seen. And really caught me by surprise. I didn't even know of this person. But she went to the U of A, which is where I am from, in Tucson, Arizona. So I went to NAU, which is northern Arizona, but she went to where I grew up, and then now is a researcher at ASU, which is smack between the two in Phoenix. And ASU has a reputation of not being like the most serious academic institution, and being kind of just a party school. But every single school is a party school in college now, and if they're allowing this type of research, they are a very serious academic institution in my mind now. It's about as serious as an academic institution gets, which, you know my opinion on it. So, right here. This is Sarah Walker, and I listened to her on Lex Fridman. I didn't even finish the discussion yet, but I did bookmark a few things that we're going to take a look at. So, School of Earth and Space Exploration, Associate Professor, Bio Center for Mechanisms of Evolution, and Sarah Walker, Physics Emerge. Where's her website? emergence.asu.edu right here. Look at that. That's pretty cool looking. So, by the way, hit the like button if you are watching. It really helps fuel the algorithm. We definitely try and get censored here every now and then by the systems, and because we are questioning the academic narrative. And not just the academic narrative. If you're questioning the scientific narrative, you're questioning every narrative. I was talking about the physics of morality, and they, started censoring us a bit. So hit the like button; it really helps. Comment down below, even if you're just commenting. Comment. That would be really appreciated. But so this is their team, and their research I was looking at: the origin of life, information in living systems, planetary networks. So one of the things that it says is to understand life, we recognize it is important to study living processes across many scales, from the micro scale interactions of chemistry happening within cells to the macro scale interactions of societies and planets. That is very, very good. That means that these people understand that what we call life is not the totality of life. There is, I mean, everything is alive, but that doesn't mean bookcases are alive. But molecules are, I would classify them as life. I would classify atoms as alive, and cells, obviously, organisms, families, obviously. And if families are alive, like, think about this, okay, guys? If cells are alive, then organisms are alive. If organisms are alive, then families are alive. If families are alive, then castes are alive. And if castes are alive, then society, human society itself, is alive because it's composed of humans, which are alive. It can't not be alive. It is alive. So, and then once you get there, you get to technology and technological singularities, and that's also alive. So, if you know my research, that's where the universe restarts itself. Basically, it doesn't restart itself; it recreates itself within itself as basically a form of reproduction. But they're they're doing some good stuff here. I was very impressed. So we're going to take a look at some of the statements by Sarah Walker because um, for her to say the things that she said is pretty remarkable. So let's go to this one first. This is on what is life.
It took me a long time to get there, right? So
Cross it out.
yeah, you crossed it off your list. It's wrong.
Next
No,
question.
no. I mean, I think it has an answer, but I think the part of the problem is, most of the places in science where we get really stuck is because we don't know what questions to ask.
Bingo.
And so you can't answer a question if you're asking the wrong question. And I think the way I think about it is obviously I'm interested in what life is. So I'm being a little cheeky when I say that's the wrong question to ask. That's exactly like the question that's like the core of my existence. Um, but I think the way of framing that is what is it about our universe that allows features that we associate life to be there? And so, really, what I guess when I'm asking that question, what I'm after is an explanatory framework for what life is, right? And so, most people they try to go in and define life, and they say, well, life is, say, a self reproducing chemical system capable of Darwinian evolution. That's a very popular definition for life. Or life is something that metabolizes and eats. That is not how I think about life. What I think about life is there are principles and laws that govern our universe that we don't understand yet. That have something to do with how information interacts with the physical world. I don't know exactly what I mean, even when I say that, because we don't know these rules.
It's a start. It's a start, like, of what she's saying. Obviously, I've delved into this stuff quite a bit, but what she's saying, I mean, I'm sure she's delved in deeper than what she's letting on here, but it's still very, this is the right path.
But it's a little bit like I like to use analogies. If you give me time to be like a little long-winded for a second, even in as I, but sort of like if you look at the history of physics, for example, this is like so we are in the period of the development of thought on our planet where we don't understand what we are yet, right? There was a period of thought in the history of our planet where we didn't understand what gravity was. And we didn't understand, for example, that planets in the heavens were actually planets or that they operated by the same laws that we did. And so there has been this sort of progression of getting a deeper understanding of explaining basic phenomena like, I'm not going to drop the cup, I'll drop the water bottle. There you go. Okay, that fell, right? But why did that fall? This is why I'm a theorist, not an experimentalist.
That could have gone wrong in so many ways.
I know it could have, especially if I did the cup and it smashed. Anyway. um, so if you take this view that there's sort of some missing principles, I associate them to information. And what the sort of feeling there is, there's some missing explanatory framework for how our universe works. And if we understood that physics, it would explain what we are. It might also explain a lot of other features we don't associate.
So this is something that she had said, which is that she believes that that we are something very special, she said, and that we are about to figure out basically what we are. I agree with this. And for science to start saying, for a scientist at an academic institution that is widely celebrated by the establishment to say we don't know what life is, it's much broader than cells and organisms, and that we are very special and we need to figure out what we are, is so different than what we have been operating under for the decades, which is that we are not very special. We are just, meat sacks, essentially, that happen by accident, and that life is just, something that happens when possibly, a puddle of amino acids gets struck by lightning, and then you get cells and organisms, and anything beyond that actually isn't alive, but that's alive. Like, that is an enormous shift, okay? Science is the umbrella for what we call society's current understanding of the world. And when that believes that we're not special and that humans aren't here for a purpose, that filters down to be hedonistic, nihilistic culture in our universities, which filters into, our young people. And that isn't good, because that filters into politics and families. It's destroying us. But this is a fundamental shift. When you look at, quantum gravity research with Irwin and his emergence theory, very similar thing there, where basically life is something much greater than what we think. Consciousness is intrinsic part of this equation of understanding existence. It might be an intrinsic part of existence. It is an intrinsic part of existence. It is existence. And, but that this places something, it places consciousness as something that is extremely valuable. And it's not just an accident. Now, I don't know if they're going to get to that yet. Everybody's still calling things emergence this, and, emergence theory is the name of Irwin's work. But Sarah Walker's theory that her and her team are working on is called integrated information theory. And it is a theory of everything. And I've never heard of it before last week. And, it's on the right track. So are all of them, like I've discussed before. But now we have another one in the ring. One of these days, I'm going to do an episode for each one of these that is specifically dedicated to that theory. We'll go over what it is and how it differs from any others, how it's similar. But they're all pretty similar, and it's definitely they're definitely on the right track. I don't agree with them on everything. I did already see some stuff that they're wrong on. I mean, one of them I know that they're wrong on, which is Sarah Walker posted on Twitter last week. She said, and utmost respect to Sarah Walker, and anybody who's working in this field, Irwin, Eric Weinstein, Garrett Lisi, Robert Edward Grant, all Nassim Haramein, all of them. They are all the leaders in science right now, I think. And, but I call out when people are wrong all the time, whenever I think somebody's wrong. Chris Langan as well, another one I'll include in there. But she had said that without time, life doesn't exist. And that is not true. But without time, growth doesn't exist, but life does exist without time. There's just multiplicity of life does not exist without time. You need time emerges from the interaction between two or more consciousnesses or two or more life forms. But when you only have one, then there is no time. So that I will say that is a big one, but it's not like that big. You can get a ton of other. You can go very, very far without getting there. That is like you're right at the very, very end there of this equation. But at the same time, you know, with that understanding that does like whether or not if you don't understand that, then you don't fundamentally understand time or life extremely well in the context of like even beyond the process. But if you and also time, like you can't understand fundamentally what time is and where it emerges from if you don't understand that. But you know, everybody's we're moving. That's very good. And for this to be in the universities, this is the bridge between, you know, all the people working outside the academic institutions and the people working within the academic institutions. It's like integrated information theory leads to things like geometric unity and Wolfram's hypergraph universe, and those things lead to sentient singularity theory. So this is a process, but for this to be in an academic institution it was surprisingly refreshing, I will say. I'm very impressed by ASU more than anyone else because, I mean, that's not anyone. That's not a someone. That's important to say. I'm more impressed with ASU than I am with, not even impressed. You can't be impressed but by something that's not a someone. I mean, maybe you can, but I'm not, like, proud of it because it's an it. It's not a someone. So this channel is called The Theory of Every0ne because that's the reality of a theory of everything. And it's important to understand the distinctions there, so I'm very careful about it. But I'm surprised that ASU is doing this. I'm surprised that any institution is doing this. It seems like even Harvard is like extremely lost with so many things. And yet you have ASU that's doing this. Kind of makes sense, but good for them. Okay, questions. Yeah, our school system is pretty bad, even the universities. It's not even pretty bad. It cannot be fixed. It cannot be fixed. It's not about what they're teaching. It's about how it's being taught. It's not allowing for learning how to think. You have to learn how to think. You can't be taught how to think. You have to be in an environment where you are allowed to learn how to think. And right now, that's becoming increasingly less possible. As it gets more restrictive, more instructive, it gets, and more repetitive, it gets less geared towards learning. Did you know between Bush Jr. and fellow bonesman John Kerry, who had the better grades? I think it was Kerry had better grades than Bush. My friend, by the way, Andrew, is Don't Tase Me Bro, the guy who was like asked if John Kerry and George Bush were both in Skull and Bones when they were both running against each other and at a university discussion, and the cops tried to pull him out and then they tased him. And he was like, "Don't tase me, bro," and it became like a meme. That guy's a friend of mine. It's very funny. That was like the original meme, like very beginnings of like the viral internet. But yeah, I think it was John Kerry. But yeah, he's a good guy. He's on some talks on YouTube regarding like religion and things like that, and he's very knowledgeable. So highly recommend his content. They were both. I do expect. Actually, we'll probably have them on here pretty soon. I did talk to them about it. They were both bottom of their classes. Okay, I didn't know they were both bottom of their classes. I didn't expect either of them to be very good, but I knew Bush was not good in school. I was not good in school, except for like a couple years in college. College, university only used to be for the wealthy and intelligent. I don't even like that word anymore, intelligence. I think we, instead of calling some people intelligent and some people not intelligent, I think we need to understand what intelligence is, and then start showing where people are intelligent in different things that they do, not different types of intelligences. There's not different types of intelligences. There's intelligence and outintelligence, and which is like, how good are you at manipulating things outside of yourself? You know, it kind of intuitively, like sports. And then there's, or music, even art. But then there's intelligence, which is like, how good are you at manipulating concepts in your mind? Um, I originally was like, there's intelligence and there's external intelligence, or internal intelligence and external intelligence. And I didn't realize that I was like, this just doesn't make sense because intelligence is internal, but so it doesn't make sense to say external intelligence, and internal intelligence is repetitive. But then I heard Eric Weinstein say outintelligence, so it's not my term, it's his, and it's the perfect term for it. So there, and my theory would predict that there is a binary nature to processing power, and that would be dictated by inside and outside, which are two of the four primary perspectives. And so it would be intelligence and outintelligence, and that is a real thing. It's not. It's predicted by my model. She is very tense. Is she wearing a green anaconda bracelet? I don't know what kind of bracelet she's wearing, but she is a, a little bit tense, I guess. I don't know if she's tense or not. I mean, it's you're interviewing. She's doing an interview, very like long. It's like 2 hours. Um, I don't think we know what gravity is now. No, we don't know what gravity is, but it's a conscious action. That's what gravity is. But you can also, it's a conscious action by God, aka existence, and but it's spin. It's a conscious action of spinning by existence to manipulate time specifically, but also a little bit of space. It manipulates space as well, but that is not so direct. It's kind of indirect. But the manipulation of time is what is the cause of gravity. The spinning of existence, or the spinning of the universe, causes time to manifest, and then we maneuver within that universe, and that is the maneuvering of space, and it maneuvers in time by changing how quickly and possibly where it spins, slower or faster. But also, there's aspects of this of how what is gravity, how is gravity perceived by us, and how does it relate to the three other fundamental forces. And the reality of that is that just as past, present, and future are within time, they are perspectives within time. Within gravity, you could say, there is electromagnetism, the strong force, and the weak force, as they are the past, present, future of gravity. So, still working on the rest of that, but that is almost 100% accurate. But there's other, I know some people right now, I was discussing it with them over the weekend, but I'm not going to say who they were, but working on, they were big fans of like Kaluza-Klein's theory, and there's also aspects of how that works into this that seems true. I mean the population, not individuals. Since turbulence is an unsolved problem of classical mechanics, how come most theories of everything don't talk about turbulence? Because theories of everything don't deal too much with classical mechanics because they still haven't figured out quantum mechanics. You have to figure out quantum mechanics before you figure out general relativity and classical mechanics. But it would work into it, but they're just not even close to there yet. Like that usually requires, once you start getting towards classical mechanics, that is where math starts getting more complicated. But all that math has to emerge from very simple math that starts at, quantum mechanics, but even before quantum mechanics, really. But which is the processes that give rise to the patterns that we see in quantum mechanics. I think Tom Campbell talks about it in The Evolution of Consciousness. Turbulence and fear are equivalent. Yeah, I've heard him say that too. I do agree with that, by the way. I think that my theory is that basically when you are fighting the universe, okay, because of fear, you are like swimming against current, okay, which is this fluid basically of, like, you could call it ether as they used to call it, but which is spun by the universe, and it is actually just the universe spinning. And when you're fighting against this, you're going to create turbulence. So once I was going for a meeting with this guy who and I was meeting him with Paulina, and he was just going to discuss like marriage with us, and he was a rabbi. He's not the rabbi that is our current rabbi, but he was a friend's rabbi and was recommended to speak to. So we went, and it wasn't like the most in line thing for us. It was more like we were going there because there was just like, it wasn't motivated by calm energy. It was like we wanted to figure something out, and this was years ago. And we also went there, and it was downtown, and it was very hard to get to, very hard to park. We were both extremely late, but different levels of extremely late. And we got there. By the time we sat down, it had been over an hour since we were supposed to start, and mainly because of parking. But we were both so stressed out, and he just looked at us and he was like, "This is because of how you are going about this, and why." And it's not like even the turbulence, basically, essentially. He didn't use that word, but that we had experienced, the chaos that we had experienced was because of our own basically fear, and uncomfortability with everything going on. And he was right. And what it is it's because the universe is moving you into where it wants you to be, and you can either allow it to and also do good along the way, in which case you're going to experience little turbulence, or you can fight it. And if you fight it, eventually you will lose, but you will experience chaos, more and more chaos. And that chaos is essentially turbulence. It's like you swimming against the current of a river. You're going to experience not the smoothest ride. So, but yeah, Tom Campbell's focus on fear being the cause of like chaos is right on. And it's because of that. You're literally swimming against the current. Like, you don't realize it. I think Robert Grant posted something today, and it was like, basically, we're fish, or I don't think it was him, it was someone else, and it was like, we're fish humans in the ether are fish in the water, and we just don't realize, that we're in the water. And it's true. So when you go and you're going towards something, that you want that isn't really in alignment and you're forcing it, you might not experience physical or not physical, our current understanding of physical resistance. But then it appears like everything was against you. You know, when you're like, you think you're going to be late to a meeting and you're freaked out, and all of a sudden you hit every single red light. You're like, this never happens ever, except when I'm running extremely late. And people will be like, no, you just notice it only when you're extremely late. No, it's not just that. It's not. It's that you are going a direction that that the timing of everything was not set up for you to just go with the flow. And just remember that, you know, God or the universe maneuvers within time. So if the timing of things seems to be not smooth, then you're going the wrong direction probably. Or you're going about it with the wrong mentality at least. I agree, you cannot experience true beauty if you are fighting the current or the nature of reality. Yeah. How can you truly appreciate something that you are fighting? Like, unless it's like you're fighting in the ring. But life is not that. Like, and anybody who's like, life is a fight. It's, no, that's you. That's you who's fighting, and I say that as a fighter by nature, and who does martial arts, like who loves to fight. I can tell you, life is not meant to be a fight. It is meant to have challenges. It is meant to challenge you, but it's not meant to be a fight. It's just not. Salmon swim upstream for a reason. Yes, they do. And sometimes we do swim upstream and it leads to, you know, the right spot. But things have to be manipulated for that to occur. Like, it doesn't, if you're swimming upstream, it's not because you were right. It's because you are stubborn. And the universe doesn't mean it, that doesn't mean it will abandon you. You know, it will reorganize. It's a living thing. It will try and cater to your needs. If that means rearranging things, then so be it. But it takes more energy for it to do it. So, you know, it's like if you don't clean your room up, you know, Jordan Peterson would say, clean your room. Like, if you don't clean your room and you're a kid, your mom's going to be pissed. And then let's say you want to do something right now, okay? But it's not the time right now. It's time to clean your room. But instead, you don't clean your room. You do the thing that you want to do right now instead of later. And then your mom wants you to clean your room and she's pissed. And you have to put more energy into cleaning the room and also dealing with, like, your mom who's now pissed at you. And she's still, like, you know, everybody's going to end up okay. But it's still more energy than it could have been. You could have just cleaned your room and then, you know, after that, when it was the right time, done the thing that you wanted to do. And that is, you know, that's kind of what I mean by this. But at the same time, some of us, like me, a lot of times, are some of those people that sometimes have to learn things the hard way. And I'm trying not to be like that so much anymore. I have been more successful at it than I have been in the past. But I am definitely somebody that doesn't take the easy road normally with a lot of things. And you do learn if you're open to learning and if you're humble enough to admit that what you did was not the best way to do things. But it's also important that you're humble enough to, you know, be self-critical if you're going to do things the hard way. Otherwise, you won't learn. Like, you have to have humility in order to learn if you're doing things the hard way. But salmon do swim upstream, and there is definitely something about that resonates with us. Something about salmon always has resonated with humans. I don't know exactly what it is, but in totality, but I do think that it's has something to do with that journey, obviously. Leaving where they are born and spawned and, hatched, not born, hatched, and then swimming downstream towards the ocean, and then eventually making their way back upstream to where they, to restart the process. That's something that is a journey that everyone and everything, I think, everyone, I don't want to say everything, everyone can relate to. And by everyone, I mean everyone, not just like humans. Fear is more like derecho, turbulence. I don't know what that is the great mixer, and without all that would be laminar. Oh yeah. Could life exist in laminar world? Could life exist in a laminar world? Change couldn't exist in a laminar world. That's what I'll say. Life exists. It lives. That's it. There is no place, or there is no such thing as the absence of life anywhere. Okay, the universe existence is alive. It's literally alive. And there's no way for it not to be alive. Any internally consistent or coherent information processing system is a self-referencing string of information, which is a self-aware entity, program, which means it's alive. And but you're right, though. Like, laminar flow, by the way, for anybody that doesn't know, if you've ever seen like a hose spurting water out, but it's like it's perfect. You can't even see the water moving. It's so perfect. It's just like an arc of perfect water. That is called laminar flow. So it's without any turbulence, essentially. And that means that nothing's mixing. Nothing's changing. So life exists in laminar flow. Change does not. But that's a very good question. So chaos, I mean, there's a point to chaos. I'm not saying there is no point to chaos. And chaos is really, even that is a perception. But you can cause chaos for you. And that's the only chaos that can exist, really. And is the perspective of chaos, because it all gets rectified in the end. But, if that's all chaos is, then that is chaos. So it doesn't matter that it's just from your perspective, if you're the experiencer of it, unless it's, that there's, it all works out. But it's sometimes doesn't work out in a way that is able to be seen by you while you're alive. So or while you are, it's not even alive. While you are in the change space, in the desktop of the computer, and which is space-time. But you don't die after you die. Death it's impossible. But, I mean, I think it's impossible. But you do stop changing. You just go into laminar mode. What species have you successfully bred this year, if any? Morning geckos. This year, chameleon geckos. I got lots of day gecko eggs, but I didn't see any babies pop out. But I'm raising more, so we'll see. And I do have some new eggs of different types of day geckos over there. That's what I've bred. All geckos. So, failed with the Amazon tree boas. I keep reptiles for those of you that don't know. And it's like my favorite. It's like my main hobby. Let's see. Fear can, of course, be a learning experience, but you have underlying continuous fear, and for it to pervade your decision making, it's very disruptive. Yes, it is. Fear is not something that is good. Fear is something that can be worked out and utilized, but it's not something that has to happen. Like it's just not. I don't think it is caused by a lack of um an ability to see the big picture. Like if you saw everything that exists, and you saw what happens after you die, and not just for you but for everyone, like you wouldn't have fear anymore. You would lose all fear. You would be. That doesn't mean you wouldn't have desires, but you would lose all fear. But also you have this, you have your instincts that are motivating you to avoid dangerous things that also cause fear. And so even if you understood logically what's going on, you might have like instinctual fear, but even if you logically knew that you shouldn't be afraid. But detached from this body, you would have no fear. Chameleon geckos. Yeah, every now and then I breed those. I don't have the best luck hatching the eggs, though. But I redid their cage, so we'll see what happens. Chameleon geckos are very cool little geckos. They're like this big, and they look like the lizard in one of the more recent Spider-Man movies, but they're very small and they eat fruit. They are great pets. I highly recommend them if you're going to get a pet gecko, a pet lizard. Let's see here. Other questions. Okay, so let's take a look at more clips. That's not what I'm trying to show you. This is what I'm trying to show you. How's it going, Matthew? So here, this is actually very good. I have so many clips for us to look at, but I'm trying to pick which one's the best. This is a good one. This is very true. We'll talk about this.
Water and ice and the chemistry that from which intelligence emerges.
Yes,
essentially.
yes. We can't decouple the information from the physics, and I think that's what we've gotten really good at doing, especially with sort of the modern age where software is so abstracted from hardware. But the entire process of biological evolution has basically been building layers of increasing abstraction. And so it's really hard to see that physics in us, but it's much clearer to see it in molecules.
Bingo. Hold on.
But I guess I'm trying to figure out what do you think are the best tools to look at it? What do you think?
An open mind? Is that a tool?
Yes,
What's the physics of an open mind?
I think if we solve that, we'll solve everything. I'm saying an open mind because I think the biggest stumbling block to understanding sort of the things I've been trying to articulate, and when I talk also with colleagues that are thinking deeply about these same issues, is none of it is inconsistent with what we know. It's just such a radically different perception of the way we understand things now that it's hard for people to get there. And in some ways, you have to almost forget what you've learned in order to learn something new, right? So I feel like most of my career trying to understand the problem of life has been variously forgetting and then relearning things that I learned in physics. And I think you have to have a capacity to learn things, but then accept that things that you learned might not be true, or might need refinement or reframing. And the best way I can say that is just like with a physics education, there are just certain things you're told in undergrad that are like facts about the world. Mm-hmm. And your physics professors never tell you that those facts actually emerge from a human mind, right? So we're taught to think about, say, the laws of physics, for example, as this like autonomous thing that exists outside of our universe and tells our universe how it works.
Yeah.
But the laws of physics were invented by human minds to describe things that are regularities in our everyday experience.
Right.
They don't exist autonomous to the universe.
Right. So
brilliant. Brilliant. Do you see what I'm saying, guys? Like, absolutely brilliant. By the way, hit the like button, please, if you think that this is useful. Like, it's very important to boost the signal as much as we can, because we are swimming upstream like those salmon. The stream is currently just controlled with a bunch of dams that are run by our institutions, and those institutions have very different incentives than they should if their goal would be the truth, but that's not their goal. So that was absolutely brilliant. Like, I don't hear almost any physicists speak like this that are employed by universities. It's honestly astounding that she is employed by a university and celebrated. And like, I have a theory on why she might be so good at this compared to many others. And I mean, there's many reasons why. Obviously, she's highly questioning, obviously intelligent, humble. Like, you have to be humble to question honestly. But also, there is this obvious. It is obviously known and also experienced by everybody who's honest, that women have a tendency to personify things, and men have a tendency to objectify people. And and that's not good, okay? But that's because women have a tendency to personify people, and that is good, or living things, and that is very good. Anything that has feelings should be personified. But men have this ability to detach themselves, which allows them to be problem solvers and build things in some ways. But so these both have a good side and a bad side. Being detached allows you to, look at things that kind of more objectively and solve problems and treat things like puzzles. But also, it can have this negative side to it, which is that you objectify people and other living, things, like including cells and molecules and atoms. Okay, but if you are somebody whose nature is more inclined to be personifying to some degree, it might not mean that you are consciously doing it, but that you might be more willing to expand, to consider expanding the definition of life. Okay? And that is pretty remarkable, because one of the things that I've noticed is that it's like this two-pronged perspective, is that you can either go the way of extraordinary, detached materialism. That's just a word that I'm using here. I think, there's no difference between matter and mind, but still, you know what I mean? And you kind of erase mind. You erase self, and you go like the Sam Harris direction, where instead of expanding the definition of life, you contract the definition of life to be like nothing's really alive. But you can go the other direction, which I would say is much more accurate. It is much more accurate, even though some people would say, oh, well, then it's not actually more accurate. They're both doing the same thing. They're not doing the same thing, because how you look at something matters. Even if you just saying, grouping this things the same way doesn't mean you've done the same thing if what you have grouped you have defined differently. So the grouping is the same if you go the direction of like Sam Harris and many other men who are involved in science. And but if you go, the other direction, which is kind of what the way that Sarah Walker has gone, is like expanding the definition of life and being like, actually, more things might be alive than we think, and it's going to help us understand ourselves, and we're actually very special. And that's something that she has said a couple times in this interview, is that we are very special. What we are doing is important. What we are is very special. Whereas you speak to Sam Harris and he's like, yeah, there's nothing special about us. We are just, there's no purpose to us. We're just here and it's by some cosmic accident and, we should just make the best of it, which is an internally inconsistent thought anyways. But still, you can see that there's a very different perspective there. And I think Sarah Walker is correct. So it's interesting, though, that it might be necessary. And I will say this, it is 100% necessary to start to personify things that are actually living beings, like molecules and like atoms and even hadrons, I think. But definitely atoms and molecules, probably also hadrons. But the thing is this, that requires personifying them. And I've said on here before when I was discussing emergence theory and Clearwin's work, and he said, the universe might be a consciousness. And he was like, that doesn't mean we need to anthropomorphize this consciousness, which means to personify, basically. And I was like, what do you anthropomorphize then, if not a conscious being? Like, that doesn't make sense. And, but that is kind of this issue that I've seen a lot of people get to in the academic world, especially, is they'll be like, oh yeah, it appears like the universe might be a mind or conscious, but we don't need to like treat it like that, really. And also, Einstein would talk about, God in certain, instances where he'd be like, oh, did God have any choice in how he created the universe and stuff like that? And people will be like, well, that's just Einstein's way of anthropomorphizing the need for beauty in the universe or something, And I don't know what Einstein really believed in, but I do believe, you can't even really trust exactly what he says, because I don't know how much dogma there was even back then about whether or not God was real. Which just means the universe is a conscious being. That's it. That's all that means. It doesn't matter what else you think. I'm not talking about the Bible or scriptures or anything like that. That's another discussion. But if existence itself is a self-aware being that's sentient, meaning it has feelings, then that's God. There's no other definition of God that could exist. There's nothing. There's nothing else. As far as like using logic to deduce what would be the highest being of existence is existence, if existence is self-aware. So there's no other definition. I'm not saying that there isn't other aspects to that definition, and there's plenty. Not discounting scripture or anything like that. I'm just saying that beyond even scripture, beyond theological traditions or even the logos of life manifested, and replicating right now around us and through us. There is basically a definition of God that would exist, and that would be existence itself. All of it is a single self-aware being. I'm looking forward to if you ever cover the conversation with Leo Gura. Your thoughts are appreciated. I'll definitely look into that, Kurt. I have not... unless that was the most recent one, possibly, actually. I did watch a little bit. No, that was Carl Friston. I was watching your recent interview. That was very good, too. I haven't finished it, but it's very good. I'll look into it. But, yeah, thanks for suggesting that. Have you ever read about Einstein and his son? No, I have not. looks as if she gets even less sleep than me. She might have. I mean, she's flew probably there for an interview. But I'm very like impressed with this work of by her and her group. Um, this is stuff that is consciousness fundamental to the universe. Like these are questions that we have not been able to avoid asking, and but they have been like forbidden to be taken seriously by academia. So to see somebody within academia actually doing this is impressive, and I was very surprised. Here. But yeah, okay, so she said a lot in what we had just gone over, but one of the things that she had said also was we cannot decouple information from the physics, and that she said we've gotten very good at doing that. And that is extremely true. Like there is this idea as of like she said that physics are this structure that just, is it is the constraints of existence within the universe. And that might be true. And it is true to some degree. That is obviously true. But where do these perceived laws come from? And where does the standard model come from? All of these things are very important to understand that they are within the context of our interpretation of with our mind. So things like an electron and what is an electron? Do electrons actually exist outside of the, observation of a human mind, which is a mind is the totality of your being. It's not just your brain. That's the physically perceived entanglement point of information streams in your body, but it's not your mind. Your mind is the totality of your being, including your environment. So, it's, but when she says that, though, is that all of these things have to be contextualized as being interpreted by the human mind. It's very, very true. Electrons don't even exist outside of perception, probably. Like they're just probably an observed point on a wave, and you're just looking at the wave, and it's just at this one particular point, and you're right here, and it's an electron. And that it is the interaction between the waves of your perception and the wave of the movement of information processing in the universe, that as those waves intersect, you're creating an environment in which you can utilize probability to make predictions. So, but it is the interaction of those waves that allow you to even use probability to make those predictions. But even then, there's probably this hyper-deterministic aspect to it. If you actually looked at it from a different perspective, you'd probably know it wouldn't be probabilistic where you would perceive electrons. It's just from a certain perspective, you perceive them according to, utilizing probability, I guess. But it's not, as opposed to it being deterministic 100%. But if you changed your perspective and shifted how you were looking at it, you'd probably be able to perceive structure 100% of the time where you were looking, if you knew where to look because you understood exactly the structures of what was going on. So this is very important, though, because then when you look at things like a quark, and you're like, what is a quark? A quark is something else that's happening I have my own theories on it. It's basically a force point that is being created. It's like a finger. It's like a quark is like, this is a quark, this is a quark, and this is a quark. And you just can't see that they're connected to the same hand, basically. But that's why you don't find quarks separate from each other, just like for the same reason you don't find fingers separate from each other. But it's just the fingers of God, essentially. But that's why you always see 2 up and 1 down, or 2 down and 1 up, because it's always, 2 fingers and a thumb. It's just like, a neutron would be like 2 down and an up. It's just like your left hand, and proton would be like 2 up and a down. which is like your right hand. And but then electrons and neutrinos are probably just your perception of the moving of information or the flow of information around a structure that is like, an atom. So if like an atom is a little instance of like a pebble in a river, you'll see like little ripples around it as it's moving. So you'll see like electrons, but that's just because the constraints of focus are requiring you to focus on one point at a time. And that's just, it is the structure of your own mind that is requiring that you see a singularity, which is why it's a particle, but it's a point. I don't even know, like, if there is a particle that is, if particle means anything, and you can't, then you have to differentiate particles. You have to differentiate like atoms or even hadrons from things like neutrinos. Like, it can't be that a neutrino is a particle and also a proton is a particle, because one of them is a multiplicity that is then united into a singularity, and the other one is just a perfect singularity. One of them is alive, one of them is not. So an electron is not a living thing. It's like looking at the pore of an elephant and being like, that pore is alive, and it's not, but it's part of something that's alive, but it's not a living thing unto itself. Proton probably is, an atom definitely is, but even a quark is not. It's like saying a finger is alive. A finger is not a living being. It is part of a living being, but it's not a living being. It might be alive, but everything's alive, but that doesn't mean that it's a living being. Just like a picture frame is not a living being, but the molecules that make it up probably are living beings. Kurt, this guy Kurt is actually pretty interesting. Kurt's channel is very interesting. They are like the longest, deepest conversations on the very, very like cutting edge of science. I highly recommend watching Kurt's channel. Sarah Walker said here, she said that an open mind is the most important tool to understanding science, and that's so true. And there are a few people these days that I would say are really doing a very good job at being open, but also being rigorous. It is important to have rigor, but also, to truly kind of like balance these two things requires the humility to accept that, like, you don't know everything, and you don't have to. You could be like, I don't know. I don't know. I have an idea, and I've gone this far, and, maybe it's right. I think it's right, but maybe it's not. And that's very important, because everybody is on a journey. So, like, nobody's reached the destination on it as far as everything goes. You can't. But you can get the basic ideas of quite a bit, like, nailed down. But eventually you're going to face a question of that, regarding something that you don't know, and you have to just kind of admit it. But academia is terrible about this, because it's not a living being. It's not. It doesn't have intrinsic coherence of information. So it doesn't have oneness of mind. And it ends up being that it has like perfect oneness of mind, like or the appearance of it, but it's not real. It's like a corporation. Corporation has no ability to make true choices at a certain point. And I've talked about this with like Tesla versus other corporations before. Tesla right now has the ability to make decisions because Elon Musk does, and he is a person. But as soon as he leaves and he's not intrinsically tied to the company and just becomes like every other company, like when Steve Jobs left Apple, it's like, why does Apple and Microsoft and Google and all of these companies right now, they all do exactly the same thing. They stick up for the same causes. They denounce the same causes. They all attack the same emojis. Like they all agreed to like get rid of the firearm emoji and just kind of like make it all, a squirt gun. And do you think that that was like a very deep like decision, or do you think that this was just kind of like reactionary and that each of those corporations could have gone their own direction but just didn't because they went the right direction? No, they have no ability to make choices anymore, and that's because there isn't coherence of information between the people at the very bottom and people at the very top. And when that happens, you've broken the oneness of mind, but it creates a non-mind, and a non-mind has like almost complete perceived oneness almost, but it's not even completely perceived oneness. It's that you have eliminated the ability to change consciously. Okay, so because of that, it's just only can go one direction, and because of that, that's what creates the appearance of mind, but it's not actually mind. It's just like there's only one thing that can happen after you are not mind. You can't make choices. So there has to be a oneness of mind, which means like everybody has to be on the same page. And there has to be a hierarchy still, but like that hierarchy has to be in touch with each other. But the thing is that we've reached a point where entities that are, and this has happened before in the past, this always happens, it's just a part of the cycle of, corporations, businesses, academic institutions, government, everything, where it loses touch, literally, with the people that it's supposed to serve, but also with the people that are involved with the process that is the functioning of the institution itself. And when this happens, you're a non-mind. And then you say like nonsense things like, here at the Jack in the Box family, or here at the Apple family. It's like fake. It's not real. It's not a family. But it will say things like that, even though all of us look at that, we're like, that makes no sense. Like, don't you know that you're not a family? It's like it doesn't have a choice. You think anybody there actually thinks that it's a family? No. That's just not true. Have you ever read about, have you seen Walter Russell's element chart? No. But I've seen a lot of his other charts, but I'm not the element chart, I don't think. I've seen Robert Edward Grant's element chart. That was amazing. I was talking to him once and I was like, we need a new periodic table, and he showed me his that is emergent from intersecting waves, and then it links it with music, and it's just like it starts to reveal this universal pattern, and it was beautiful. I mean, if you look at the periodic table of elements, it's a hideous piece of work. It's worse than our standard model, which is actually pretty good, except for the Higgs, which is not good. We don't understand it. We haven't actually observed it. And it breaks the symmetry of the standard model, the Higgs does. And there is a field that is there that causes, the appearance of mass and stuff like that, but it's not, we don't understand it yet. Like, this mainstream science does not understand the Higgs. What it thinks the Higgs is not what the Higgs is. It's like the graviton. Everybody still talks about, I was researching, I keep fidgeting with my ring and keep dropping it. But I was reading this conversation on a Discord, physics Discord, and these people were like, they're all PhDs in physics, and they're talking about gravitons, and they're like, well, gravitons are, I think they were like, gravitons are massless or something like that. I don't know exactly what they were saying. I wasn't getting into the conversation, but I was just focused on the fact that they said gravitons, And to say gravitons is wrong. There's no gravitons. There's one graviton, and you're in it. And when you're in it, then you can perceive three perspectives of it. Like when you're in time, you see past, present, future. When you're in gravity, or the graviton, which is the force carrier particle of gravity, which means if you're perceiving gravity, then you're in the force carrier particle of it to some degree. Like, but it's different because it's literal. Okay, it's like a superposition between a force carrier particle, what we call that, and we need to totally redo that, like I said before. Particles, like, what is a particle? I don't know. There's points. That's what I would define everything in the standard model as, is a point, not a particle. And then you could, anything that is kind of more a particle, I guess, would be like a holonic mind, which is like hadrons, atoms, molecules, cells, organisms, families, castes, nation. But other than that, there's no particles. Like an electron is not a particle. It's like the whole one electron universe theory is pretty like close. It's one electron, but it's that electron is also the graviton, and it's kind of like that. But you just perceive it in a triality when you're in it, always, just like time, just like space. So you see length, width, height, forwards, backwards, current location, X, Y, Z. That's like space, but you're in space. So the particle is the space particle, but when you're in it, you perceive, and you're maneuvering through it, you perceive triality. And by the way, that triality is due to the constraints of your mind. And it is because you have to know where you are in order to maneuver. And in order to maneuver and know where you are, you have to know where you've been, and you also have to know where you want to go. And if you don't know where you want to go, then you don't know where you are, because where you are is in relation to where you want to go. So this is something constructor theory actually understands very well, is that like everything has to be organized in terms of goals. It's not about just like length, width, and height. This is a perception that helps us maneuver. But when you are the center of this, it's about forwards towards a goal, backwards away from your goal, and you're always stuck in your current location. So this is an intrinsic constraint. The extrinsic constraint is time, because you have no control over it. But the intrinsic constraint is just your current location in space. So then you flip this for the universe and everything reverses. So its intrinsic constraint is space, and it can maneuver information forwards in time or backwards in time, but that doesn't mean what we think it means. And it's always also in the present, which is the intrinsic constraint. Its extrinsic constraint actually is space. That's what it is. So everything reverses. It's a mirror. Like consciousness is a mirror, but you are a conscious mirror inside of a conscious mirror. So it's just reflecting like in on itself, like those cubes that are what's it called? Like the Tesseract type looking cubes that some artists make. There's one artist who's very famous, who makes like an infinity mirrored cube structure, or you've seen it go around Instagram, and it's like very viral, and it's always playing the song from Interstellar, and as you look through it, it's just like infinitely repeating into a fractal. And that is because they've put like mirrors, a mirrored structure inside of a mirrored structure. And that is literally what consciousness is. You're a mind inside a mind, which is a mirrored, a maneuverable mirror within a maneuverable mirror, essentially. And it's beautiful. I mean, it's literally beautiful. It could not be more beautiful. Like the reality of science and what we're about to understand is just how beautiful it really is. We think people say things like it's beautiful, and you can look up at the stars and you're like, that's beautiful, and you look at nature and you're like, that's beautiful, and it is. But we don't. But then we look at the universe in physics and we're like, it's a pointless, chaotic accident that will end either very hot or very cold, and either case, everything you did was for nothing. And that there's no plan to any of this. It was a cosmic accident, which, by the way, what is an accident if somebody doesn't make a mistake in the first place or do something that was unintentional? So, like, even the concept of accident being applied to an unconscious system, like a system absent any consciousness, which I don't even know if that can exist, is internally inconsistent. It just is. So this new form of science, though, is going to be uniting all of the scientific fields. And this theory of everything. This is why everybody's got their theories of everything, and they're all onto like kind of the same thing. And it is because every other subjective field right now is stalled out because we need a new perspective to look at them all from, like Sarah Walker had said, of like, everything that she's saying doesn't invalidate what we know. It's just a new perspective. That's so true. And I had said that when I started this work too, to some people in physics. I was like, what I'm finding is that my perspective gives rise emergently to the, structures in the standard model. And also, many other just aspects of experience that that we, can see and that we experience. And I'm not claiming that we're wrong. I'm just claiming our perspective on what we know is wrong. I'm not saying atoms don't exist. I'm not saying hadrons don't exist. And then I was told, like, you can't use those words if you don't understand them. You can't use the word atom. But that's because it's just pearl clutching. That's what it is. Like, don't use the words atoms. Those are our words. But science is for everybody, but those are our words. But atoms do exist. Molecules do exist. Organisms do exist. Cells do exist. All of these things exist. And it's just a matter of how are you looking at them. The sun exists. The earth exists. But, like, what does all of that mean is the question. And why does that exist is the question. Does an electron exist? Sure, you can see it. You can measure it. But what is it? Okay? Is it a little ball, like a little marble thing with a negative charge? Or is it that, information is moving in a wave and you just looked at it and you could only see like a sliver of it? Basically, like if you cut something into slivers that's moving almost, and you just could look at that one line of it, but really it's not even one line. It's like then you compress that line down into a point. You can only focus on one point at a time. That's why you can look at a word and see it as like stop, like on a stop sign. But if you need to sound it out, then you're looking letter, 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 letter. If like you don't speak, English or something like that, you have to actually read it. But when you grow up speaking English and it's fluent in it, and you look at a stop sign, you don't even read it really fast. You're just like all at once. And this is because of the constraints of mind cause you to compartmentalize things, information, if you're going to absorb it. And that's always into singularities. So if you put it if you group a bunch of things together into a singularity, then you've condensed the information to such a degree that you aren't actually like absorbing it all. You're just absorbing a condensed version of it that I probably can't be uncondensed, really. I don't know. because I don't know, maybe that's like probably situational. I do think about that sometimes when people talk about hypnosis, things like that, and they're like, I don't remember, they were like, what time was it in the room? And like you're going backwards in your mind, and under hypnosis you remembered what time it was in the room. Maybe you can do that, but I bet even if you could, it's taking advantage of a different process than you absorbed everything that was going on at that moment, and you just only can remember a little bit of it. I think that that's probably not what's happening. It's probably more actually remarkable than even that, if you can actually do that. But you have to kind of like compartmentalize things, and that's what we've done with science. We've broken the fields down: chemistry, biology, sociology, even physics, and theology. But the thing is that the next step is to combine them all. The problem is you're dealing with a lot of egos, and anybody that wants to take seriously the idea of a theory of everything has to kind of like let go of the pearls a little bit, and I guess just realize that there will be people who weren't trained in a field who are able to perceive patterns in other fields that they weren't trained in, that were not perceived by the people who specialize in those fields. So like once I was kind of having a discussion with a geneticist, and he was like, talking about how we could avoid a lot of the problems with CRISPR because you basically can have this more accurate form of cutting the information, and that, that was the most important thing, and that I shouldn't be so concerned about CRISPR because of that. But I was like, actually, that's not even my concern. Like, my concern is that you're breaking the coherence of information in a self-referencing chemical blockchain. Like, what happens when you do that? It doesn't matter how precisely you do it, but you have to also kind of like be looking at a blockchain, and you have to be looking at consciousness and what is self-awareness and what is self-referential information, in order to be like, okay, that DNA double helix structure over there, that's actually just the objective structure of information processing in the universe, and it's actually just the chemical instantiation of the internal perspective of the fiber bundles, information processing, and that if you change it, it'd be like changing information in a blockchain, and the blocks don't fit back together then. And what is the implications of this? Do you destroy internal mental coherence of the universe? Like, do you cause chaos by changing your genes outside of context? And they'll be like, well, we got to test it to see, like, if it causes cancer. And I'm like, that's not what I'm worried about. But you have to be outside of that system, looking in almost, to like realize that kind of stuff. Because if you're in it, then you're like researching genes, and you're like, this gene does this, this gene does this, this gene does this. And like, yeah, you can't have the wrong genes on, but they're not thinking about this as coherent information processing of the universe itself. They're like, this is like the code of how an organism, is created. Yeah, exactly. But where is that? How is it possible for that structure to be detached from everything else going on? It's impossible. There is no such thing as detached. There are degrees of freedom and constraints. So there are some things that are more directly impacted and some things that are less directly impacted, but there is no total detachment of information. This is the big problem with quantum computing. It's like, how do you isolate qubits? How do you detach them from everything else so that they can, be used to do things that you want them to do, that have nothing to do with what else is going on in the universe? You can't. But you can set up the qubits in a way that allows for degrees of freedom that allow you to do useful things. Like, that's what you have to do. You can't actually isolate qubits. like really, like truly, completely. They're all connected to the entanglement substructure of the universe, the scaffolding structure, and that is actually more fundamentally real than what we're seeing. Like Bernardo Castro put it perfectly, actually, and I think it was a conversation with Kurt. It might have been Lex Friedman, though. I can't remember. And they said that what we are perceiving, I think it was Kurt, is like a heads-up display of data coming to us if you're a pilot, and it's telling you you're 2,000 feet off the deck, and you have to pay attention to that information because if you ignore it, you're going to crash. But it's not actually reality. Reality would be looking out the window. But for us, looking out the window, like, or looking around you right now, that's the heads-up display, and reality would be like your feelings. It's probably like the most real and most connected like perception you have of the web of existence. But and you could call that your intuition, but people would say that that's not science. But people will say things like, well, that's not falsifiable, so that's not science. But the thing is that if you really want a theory of everything, then first of all, we have to throw out the idea of everything has to be falsifiable. Because if you find something that's truly a theory of everything, then it exists everywhere, which means it's not possible to falsify it. It would exist in every instance of observation that you look. So you have to, Stephen Wolfram said this to Lex Friedman, he's like, you have to start looking for confirmation, like repeated confirmation and prediction, not falsifiability. Because how could you be looking for falsifiability? That's ridiculous. If you really, any theory of everything is not falsifiable. It's like consciousness. It is consciousness. The theory of everything is theory of consciousness. So you can't falsify consciousness. You prove it when you even try to falsify it, because you as a conscious being need to try and falsify consciousness in order to even, try. So it's just, you prove it. This is the same thing with God. This is the same thing with any true theory of everything, is it's everywhere. And you can't falsify it. You have to look for it to confirm it repeatedly by making a prediction and then seeing if it holds. So my definition of a theory of everything, on my website is right here. Sentient Singularity. What is a theory of everything? It's really a theory of everyone. And a theory of everything is a recognizable, predictable, and describable pattern that occurs in all instances of objective observation and an explanation for such a pattern. I see so many people say things like, we don't even know what a theory of everything really is. And the people that know what it is say that. Eric Weinstein says that a lot. And he knows what it is. But I don't think he's nailed down how to say it. And you can't move forward until you have the language. Got into this debate with Michael Knowles once, and I was like, no, you can understand something if you have like the geometric visual in your head. And that's true to some degree, but you can't communicate it and actually narrow it down, even to yourself completely, until you can compress that information into something that's really, really able to be interpreted by the mind. So you have to compress that picture in your head into language. And he was right and I was wrong, actually, in this debate, this 2 a.m. debate that we had. And you have to have the language. This is the language. It can't be anything other than that without defining exactly what the pattern is insinuating, or I guess insinuating. Like, what is the pattern really? It's mind. But that's what it would be no matter what, even if it's not about consciousness. But the thing is it is. That's the thing. A theory of everything is a recognizable, who's doing the recognizing, a consciousness. Predictable, who's doing the predicting, a consciousness. And describable, who's doing the describing, a consciousness. Pattern, who's perceiving the pattern, a consciousness. That occurs in all instances, okay, of experience by a consciousness that is objectively observed by a consciousness and explained, an explanation for such a pattern, like by a consciousness. Like you, and it's funny because like the explanation in this in reality is that existence is a sentient self-aware being, creating singularities of sentience within itself. It's that simple. We expect the theory of everything to be so complicated, and it's not. It's what is the universe? What is existence? What are we? What are atoms? It's like existence is a singularity of sentience, creating sentient singularities within itself. And then there is a pattern in which that is done, and that pattern of logos, or the generative nature of existence, the generative pattern of existence, is the pattern that you could call a theory of everything. But it is not detachable from consciousness or mind. But you can't do that with any field, actually. But it's easy to do it, as Sarah Walker said, with compartmentalized fields already. But as you get more and more, my dogs are barking because my wife is home, but they'll stop in a minute. But as you get more and more universal, and you get to things like quantum physics, which is actually metaphysics, but it's just, we've removed mind from it. We'll say, I don't know, all of those particles, quote unquote, in the standard model exist outside of mind. If you do that, first of all, you're wrong. But second of all, you've destroyed the field. Like, it is metaphysics. If you include mind as the structure in which those are being, observed within, and they have to be, like, that is logical because you're the one, like, who deduced the standard model? A mind. Like, a bunch of minds, actually. Kind of. Universe is a mind, so. But it's the many one problem, but it's not really a problem. It's just that is just intrinsic reality. It's that you are part of, and also unto it yourself, a mind, or a singularity of sentience, which means you feel you. And that's why sentience is such an important word when actually understanding reality, is because it's not about, like, consciousness is kind of too ambiguous. It's just you have an awareness of something somehow. But sentience is very specific, and it's about, feelings. And feelings are what happens when information is processed in a way that is then related back to the self. So how you feel about something is it's dictated by how does that information that you've just processed, how do you interpret it as impacting you? Okay? So if you feel bad about something, and if you see something happen to somebody and it's like unfortunate, and it makes you sad, that is because in some way you are looking at that and you're like, what if that was my parent that got hurt? What if that was my sibling that got hurt? My, I don't know, child. And it is recontextualized around you. And if you detach it from you completely, it doesn't give you feelings. You can't feel bad for somebody losing a friend without being like, wow, I'd feel horrible if I lost my friend. If you didn't do that, and if you had no friends ever, and you didn't value having friends, and there was just no need to have anyone else in your life according to you, and you saw somebody else lose someone that they deeply cared about, it wouldn't matter how hard they wept, you wouldn't feel anything for it. And even if you understood logically what had happened, but you haven't felt it because you haven't related it to you. It takes relating it to you. It's almost like in order to be empathetic, you actually have to be self-centered. But, you know, a lot of these things are superpositions and things that appear to be opposing are actually, you know, dependent, like, you know, free will and determinism and heads and tails on a quarter or a coin, and also self-centeredness and empathy. I've never thought about that one. That's a new one. But it's true though, you know. Here, let's see, questions. Ethan, what's up, Ethan? Did you check out the talk I sent by Jeremy Soul about music intervals? No, I did not yet. Soul did the music for Guild Wars 1 Classic. I don't know what that is. Yep, and Oblivion and Skyrim. Oblivion had great music. I don't know if I've seen Skyrim or not, but Oblivion had... I mean, the movie was weird, but I bet if I watched it again, I'd see more things in it that were interesting. But the music was wonderful. Yeah, all-time favorite music, yep. Apple is a machine now. Yeah, Apple is a machine. Everything that is like that big corporation is just becomes a machine. Like there's no decision-making process anymore. You have to have the ability to do something and the motivation, which means you also have to have sometimes the motive to go against what is easy, I guess. It's more, there's a better way of saying that, but if all you ever did, it's like when people say, oh, did you sell your soul? It's like, if all you did ever was pursue pleasure and nothing else, it will lead to you basically doing exactly what happens to a company that only pursues maximizing shareholder value, you know. And I was a finance major, and I'm like, so I know, I understand why these things are valued in business, but it's not, if you just become an equation, your business just becomes an equation, and it's not, there's no like way of standing up for what, you know, is right or what isn't easy or something like that, then you just lose all mind. You are not mind. You become what constructor theory calls a constructor, but which is a machine that is not conscious. And what is it? Constructor theory call like a user, I think. There's users, which are the sentiences, and then there's constructors. And constructor theory is about constructors, which makes it not actually a true base level theory, because it's not, but it's probably the second closest, other than sentient singularity theory. But constructor theory is still a remarkable piece of work, and I mean, there's so much value in it. There's value in all of these theories, like I said, but you have to understand what reality is. And that means you have to personify it a little bit, which means that women might have an easier time moving forward in science. Like, that doesn't even mean that they're definitely going to be the ones that come up with the ideas. How could I say that? Because I'm not a woman. And I'm working on this. But I am personifying existence, and until I did that, I couldn't move forward. So that is a valuable perspective to have, and it is easier for women to do that than men. It's just a fact. And this is why, you know, all of these things are they're not strengths or weaknesses. They are strengths in the correct contexts and weaknesses in others. Like, it's not a strength to objectify people, even though it is a weakness of men to objectify people. But it is a strength to objectify, a situation. And if you need to like figure out a puzzle, like if you're playing chess, for instance, like if you personify things in chess, then you're not detaching from it and enough to probably see the big picture. And obviously there's statistics in chess to back up that would be a perspective in chess that would be probably pretty useful. But if existence is a sentient being, and that the pattern of the theory of everything is about defining what is the pattern that sentience follows, or that mind follows. What is the pattern of mind? And that, all of existence in the universe and various other levels of life, or levels of existence that we don't currently define as life, but would be alive if life means anything, if that word means anything, requires you personifying it. It will probably be easier for women. Like once Stephen Wolfram was asked, I forgot if it was by, again, Kurt or Lex Friedman, but I've watched interviews of a number of people on both of those channels. They're both great channels. I think that they both have like a lot of value in today's like scientific environment. They're like leading the way. But I think that I really like that Kurt's channel is more open to strangeness, I guess, like what they call that right now. But I don't think it is that. I think that there is an aspect to reality that like requires taking a more open mind to things like God and skinwalkers, like things like that. But you're not going to get that much of that on Lex's channel. But steps, like we have to take steps. So that's one of the most frustrating things always for everybody in every journey that you're in, is if you get somewhere and you look at everybody else and you're like, why aren't you here with me? But you have to realize that like you didn't get there in a giant leap, even if it looks like it looking back. Everything is a step. And that's including, the broader culture of academia. There are steps to it. We move to, it's the universe is processing information. The universe is a computer. The universe is a mind. The universe is thinking. The universe is feeling. Which means like it's conscious. But I think Stephen Wolfram, though, was asked, is the universe intelligent? That's what he was asked. And he said yes. And then he was asked, is it conscious? And he was like, no. Which he's wrong, but it's a step. And he explained why he thinks that what he thinks, but what he said makes no logical sense if you back up and re-examine it. Is like that he was basically saying that, and I know why he's saying this, is that he's looking at he's looking at branchial space, and he's looking at, as he calls it, and then there's another word that for another structure in his model that he's looking at, and what he's not seeing a connection between the two that is direct. But that's because one of those is being made by consciousness outside, so the universal consciousness, and the other one is being made by consciousness inside, just like space is maneuvered by us. Time is maneuvered by, the universe essentially, and is our constraint, whereas space is the constraint of the universe because it can't escape itself. It is the space that we experience. So this, though, because it's two sentiences that do have enough of a disconnection to where, if separateness actually exists between anything, there is a separation, which there does have to be that separation between you and me, and us and God, in order for meaning to exist, because meaning is about your impact on others, which means there has to be others. And but if you look at it from a specific perspective, you would see that it would appear like those two systems are not connected. And that's what he was saying, is that, this model and this model don't appear to have an interaction that is like intrinsic, I guess, to the point of like a function. Okay. Whereas like you put one in on this side and you get an output on the other side. That doesn't actually happen when you're talking about two sentiences interacting. Like, it doesn't have to, at least, I'll say that. It happens by choices. But he's expecting the interaction between those two things to not include the possibility of choices. And but when you include the possibility of choices, it creates a disconnect between those two, systems of freedoms and systems of constraints. But so I understand why he's saying that. But it's just not accurate. It's just that you are inside of a conscious being, but you are also a conscious being inside of a conscious being. He's not thinking of, okay, well, if the universe is a conscious being, then there's just intrinsic coherence of information everywhere, and that it doesn't really like allow for much choice then. But the thing is that's not exactly what's happening. It's like you either have to disregard yourself as a being that can make choices within its degrees of freedom of constraints, or you have to disregard the universe as a being that is itself capable of making choices within its degrees of freedom and constraints. And you have to take both into account, but you can't focus on both at the same time. Like I said before, it's like a coin. Like, that there's heads and tails to this dime, but you can never see both sides at the same time. It's literally impossible. You have to figure out a trick to do it. But you can't see both heads and tails at the same time. But they're both there. And it would look like they're totally disconnected in certain circumstances because you never see them interacted. But you never see them interacting almost because they're always interacting. It's, again, a superposition where two things appear to be mutually exclusive but are actually dependent. That's giving Stephen Wolfram the perspective, I think, that he's seeing, that makes him think that the universe isn't conscious. But he's actually looking at two different information processing systems. One is coming from us going out, the other one's coming from the universe coming in. And they are like two sides of a coin. You can't look at both simultaneously. We can't, at least. Cool. So it is now 8:50. Any final questions before I go? I've been keeping it to about 2 hours, and not going over, even though this was a great stream. There's so much more I wanted to discuss, but we also discussed a lot. I'm trying to think. I'm looking at this list right now that I had. There was this moment where I'll just show this and then I'll leave, or answer any other final questions right after I show this. But This was also from Sarah Walker's interview, which like I said, I didn't finish yet, but I will. It's very good. I highly recommend it. I don't know. I haven't seen any other interviews of her yet, but I will. But I will. But here is. She says something profound here.
To work on to try to recreate the historical origin of life on Earth, or echoes of the historical origin.
I think echoes is more appropriate. I don't think asking the question of what was the exact historical sequence of events and engineering every step in the process to make exactly the chemistry of life on Earth as we know it is a meaningful way of asking the question.
Right.
And it's a little bit like, if since you're in computer science, like if you know the answer to a problem, it's easier to find a program to specify the output, right? But if you don't know the answer a priori, finding an algorithm for, like, say, finding a prime or something, it's easy to, verify it's a prime number. It's hard to find the next prime, and
possibly not anymore, but that's another topic.
The way the original life is structured right now in the historical problem is the answer and you're trying to retrodict it by breaking it down into this set of procedures where you're putting a lot of information in. And what we need to do is ask the question of how is it that the rules of how our universe is structured permit things like life to exist, and what is the phenomena of life? And those questions are obviously essentially the same question. And so you're looking essentially for this missing physics, this missing explanation for what we are, and you need to set up proper experiments that are going to allow you to probe the vast complexity of chemistry in an unconstrained way with as little information put in as possible to see when does information actually emerge? How does it emerge? What is it? Part of the sort of conjecture we have is that this physics only becomes relevant, or at least this is my personal conjecture, and it's sort of validated by this kind of theory experiment collaboration that we have working in this area. That this, sort of, I made the point about, like, gravity existing everywhere, right? But when you study an atomic nucleus, you don't care about gravity. It's not relevant physics there, right? It's weak. It doesn't matter. And so this idea that there's kind of a physics associated with information, for me, it's very evident that physics doesn't become relevant until you need information to specify the existence of a particular object. And the scale of reality where that happens is in chemistry, because the combinatorial diversity of chemical objects that can exist far exceeds the amount of resources in our universe. So if you want it, you can't make every possible protein of length 200 amino acids. There's not enough resources. So in order for this particular protein to exist, and this protein to exist in high abundance, means that you have to have a system that has knowledge of the existence of that protein and can build it.
So existence comes to be at the chemical level. So existence is most best understood at the chemical level.
It's most evident.
And I'm going to have to give that a lot of thought. I actually have been giving that a lot of thought. But I'm going to give it more thought of what exactly she said. But they were discussing, the echoes of the origin. And I know that this isn't exactly how they were using it, but if existence is a sentient singularity, creating singularities of sentience within itself, that is echoes of the origin in a way, essentially. But I mean, Lex is asking about life on Earth. How did that emerge, essentially? And, she's talking about chemistry. I definitely think that it's possible, but it's also possible that atoms are sentient beings themselves. But the thing is that at that level of structure, you've got basically like hadrons making them up. And my conjecture was that it was at the point of hadrons that life emerged, essentially. But it's really that structure is completed at atoms, which almost makes it about at the chemical level. But you'd have to get like more into that, because it's hard, because basically you have this structure where like an atom is an assembly of hadrons, a molecule is an assembly of atoms. So because you have this head-body pattern that basically like slinkies its way through existence, there's where do you start chemistry really? Is it at the level of atoms or is that at the level of molecules? Where do you start? I don't know, like I guess sociology really? Is it at the level of families or is it at the level of castes? Or is it at the level of individuals or is it at the level of families? This is the question that it doesn't really have a clear. There's a gnat bothering me. It doesn't really have a clearly defined answer. You just have to understand what the structure is that you're looking for and understand why it could be this or that. It's not that it's blurry. Line is not blurry. There's no such thing as a spectrum or blurriness in the theory of everything. It's just, it's like this right here. It's a good example. And then I'm going to go. Where is it? So I'd made this model and I haven't really presented it too much and discussed it too much because it was kind of a new realization, but I'm going to show it real quick because it's important. And I also want there to be it to be seen on here for next time. Right here. Here we go. Come on, computer. Bingo. And this. So this right here is showing what I mean. Is that basically this is one level. It's not two. So you can break it into basically two, which would be like this. So you get 8 when you do this, okay? But you go hadron, atom, molecule, cell, organism, family, caste, technological singularity, essentially. But when you realize that there's a connection happening where basically this one and is this, which is this. So because of that, you can combine them and condense the information. And when you do that, you get this. And you're like, hadrons are, an atom is hadrons. See, a singularity of one atom is hadrons, is of hadrons. A cell of molecules or macromolecules. And a family of organisms, a technology of castes. Okay, so you're getting singularity on this side and multiplicity on this side, and you've just condensed it all. And it's just a much more efficient way of showing this. And what's interesting is you get 4 levels, which is exactly what you would expect. But yeah, I mean, you might even be able to change that because if it just depends on if atoms are actually sentient. If atoms are sentient, then it stays at 4. If they're not, and they're just the fingers of, God, then it goes to 5. And it doesn't go to 5, then it goes to 3. But I think that it's going to stay at 4. Because even if hadrons are not sentient, which I think that they are, they certainly follow the patterns of sentience. You have this, triality of input and also a weighted aspect of it that allows you to form the information into a hierarchy. So that's why you have a 2/3, 1/3 pattern there instead of just like a 50-50. But that is also true of atoms with you know, the electromagnetic field essentially, and being an influence, and then you've also got a proton and a neutron, and as you go on, you can find that family. You could say it's children and or the reproductive field almost, or like the sexual field, this field of sexual energy or creative energy surrounding basically a man and a woman. You know, you can do this with cells too. It's just everywhere, but you can condense it down. The only question is, are hadrons sentient? And if they are, then it starts below chemistry, I guess. But if they're not, then I guess you could say that it starts at chemistry. But I think that it's pretty apparent that atoms are, to me at least, it seems apparent that they are sentient. But, you know, if these are the levels, it just, where does it start? But I think it's here. It doesn't start at quarks. Quarks are not sentient. That is a definite. You have to just figure out this one, because it's almost like if quarks are the fingers of God, then a hadron is a hand of God. And that would kind of almost insinuate that it's not sentient, which is a little bit, you know, it's just, but it still has all the patterns necessary for sentience, which is what makes it hard. So it's questionable, I guess, but for now I'm going with hadrons are where it starts. Instead of, you know, molecules or atoms, I would say it starts at hadrons for now. But it's really the only question I have as far as the rest of this goes. But maneuvers in space via individuals, maneuvers in time via lineages, and that is all time is it's just like lineages. The replication of individuals via lineages. There is no time outside of lineages. So, all right. Got some clip ideas from the stream. Awesome. Very cool. I'm looking forward to seeing that. I did do a interview, by the way, with Pat on Pat Life podcast. I already did one, and I did post that one here. I have not posted the other one here. If you're interested in checking it out, I suggest checking it out. It was on a couple topics. It was exploring some models later on in the interview, and at the beginning we were just discussing, you know, what do we know about our history, and you know, what could be the nature of UFOs and things like that. So it was like much more broad, but you can check that out at his channel, which is linked in the description of the last interview that I gave with him. So, all right, guys, I'll be back tomorrow. Thank you, everyone, for stopping by. Please hit the like button. Really helps with the algorithm. Again, thanks for stopping by. Always grateful. So.